Stephanie, it's a day that is now 3.5 years later than the tragic day, August 3rd, 2019, when 23 people were gunned down inside the Cielo Vista Walmart, dozens more wounded, and lives forever changed, whether it be the victims' families or the people who were inside that store that morning and traumatized for the rest of their lives. And this day now coming as a re-arraignment here inside the federal courtroom, courthouse room that you see just over my shoulder, where Patrick Crusius appeared in court before a judge for just the third time in those 3.5 years. The last time he appeared in person before a judge, you have to go back 3 years ago to February of 2020, when he pled not guilty to those 90 federal charges, including hate crime charges. As you mentioned, ABC7's Saul Saenz was inside the courtroom as they read off the list of charges. He joins me live now, and so we'll paint us the picture of what it was like inside the courtroom today.
Well, I can tell you that it was very solemn.
I'm joined live by the former El Paso mayor, Dee Margo. Of course, he was at the helm of the city here when that tragedy happened just over 3.5 years ago. Mayor Margo, thanks again for taking some more time with us here on ABC 7 at 5. You were also inside the courtroom this afternoon. What was the moment that stood out to you and impacted you the most?
Well, it started with the reciting of all the names for all the counts. Each name 3 times.
This rearrangement happening 3 years later because federal prosecutors announced just weeks ago, last month, that they would not be seeking the death penalty in this case, and so the not guilty plea changes to guilty on all 90 of those charges. So Stephanie, this is 3.5+ years now in the making to get to where we are this evening.
And now we want to go back to the federal courthouse and check in with my co-anchor Erik Elken. Erik.
Stephanie, and as understandably so, a lot of the attention today is on the accused Walmart shooter, Patrick Crusius, as it is only the third time we have seen him. Only one other time, of course, as you referenced, in 2019, that he was actually seen on camera, because that was at the state level where we could record inside the courtroom. But just the third time we've seen him before a judge over these 3.5 years. But of course, the attention has to be on the 23 victims lost and the dozens others who were wounded that day, and everyone else who was impacted by August 3rd, 2019. ABC7's Brianna Perez was able to speak to some victims' family members who were inside the courtroom as those counts were being read. Brianna joins us live now. Brianna, we'll have some extra perspective from former state prosecutor James Montoya in just a matter of minutes here live on ABC 7 at 6 for some extra perspective on what ultimately could happen once the sentencing phase is done in this federal case, and potentially Patrick Crusius is then put into state custody, back into state custody, which would then allow that state trial to eventually happen down the road. We'll have more on that in just a moment. But of course, among the 23 victims were not just here El Pasoans and Americans, also Mexican nationals who were involved, as this does affect the entire borderland, not just the El Paso community on this side of the border, but the community at large. And for more perspective on how Juarezans are reacting to today's rearraignment and guilty plea from Patrick Crusius, ABC7's Heriberto Perez reports. These are the first images we're seeing from inside the courtroom today, just happening within the last couple of hours, when Patrick Crusius pled guilty to 90 federal charges, including hate crime charges. Those 90 counts all being read off one by one by the judge, and pleading guilty ultimately to each and every one of those, something he did not do 3 years ago, almost to the day, in February 2020, when he pled not guilty to all 90 charges. But of course, the death penalty now off the table in the federal case. I want to take you up to speed to look back at a timeline of all this, because it is over the course of 3.5 years. On October 10th of 2019, Patrick Crusius made his first court appearance. He was officially charged and pled not guilty to capital murder charges, that on the state level. Then on February 6th of 2020, so just 3 years ago plus a day, Crusius appeared in federal court and was charged with hate crimes, those 90 counts of federal charges in total. And then on June 24th of 2022, federal prosecutors set a trial date for January of 2024, so next year. That trial, though, will no longer happen because of today's plea. And finally, then on January 17th, 2023, just a couple of weeks ago, federal prosecutors announcing they would not be seeking the death penalty in this case. And that is why we are where we are right now outside the federal courtroom. Of course, this is not just a tragedy that affected the El Paso community, but the borderland as a whole, with Mexican nationals also being killed and gunned down in this horrific act of violence on August 3rd of 2019. ABC 7's Heriberto Perez reports from Juarez on the other side of the border. Welcome back live outside our team coverage continuing here on ABC 7 at 5 of the accused Walmart shooter being pleading guilty to 90 federal charges, including hate crime charges, just inside the building over my shoulder. Of course, this coming more than 3.5 years now since August 3rd of 2019 when it happened. We are getting some new images from inside the courtroom, of course, being a federal case. No recording devices allowed inside. This first one is the newest image we've obtained. The accused shooter, Patrick Crusius, on the left side of your screen wearing the green mask, his hair much longer than it was the last time we saw him in October of 2019. And then to his right is one of his defense attorneys, Joe Spencer, this courtesy of El Paso Matters. The second sketch that we have received just within the last few minutes here shows his defense team, Patrick Crusius there, the second one from the left, standing behind the podium, and then his defense attorneys, both Joe Spencer as well as Mark Stevens, in the courtroom. You can also notice that everyone is wearing a mask inside. So will signs making the observation that that made it more difficult to see what his demeanor actually was, but that is a requirement inside the federal courtroom. That is all the time we have here for ABC 7 at 5. Our team coverage of this rearraignment of Patrick Crusius continues coming up on ABC 7 at 6. We'll see you then.